The silence before the stormed night was quiet, too quiet for Los Angeles. Keanu Reeves sat alone on his balcony, a half-finished script in his hands. But his eyes were far away. He watched the city lights below, thinking about how noise had replaced meaning in his world. Fame, money, attention, they used to mean something. But now they only filled the silence that came after the laughter stopped. Somewhere inside, he still carried the ache of losing too many people he loved. But tonight felt different. The air had a strange calm, as if the universe was waiting for him to remember something he'd forgotten. A soft sound broke the silence, the vibration of his phone. It was a message from Sandra Bullock. They hadn't spoken in months, maybe years. Her words were simple, but heavy. "Do you ever dream about what might have been?" His heart stilled. He read the message again and again. He didn't know if she meant their movie from decades ago, or the quiet understanding they'd always shared off-screen. That connection everyone saw, but neither of them ever named. Keanu typed, then deleted, then typed again. "Sometimes I do." He hesitated before pressing send. An hour later, she replied, "Me too. Maybe we should talk about it before the dreams fade away." That night, Keanu couldn't sleep. He remembered the first time he met her, her laughter, her warmth, the way she made every crew member feel seen. He remembered how, during breaks, they'd sit in silence, not needing words. She'd once told him that silence was where real truth lived. He hadn't understood then. He did now. The next morning, he found himself driving toward a small cafe in Malibu, the one they used to stop by after long days on set. The ocean breeze carried a soft mist, the smell of salt and memory. He parked his bike, walked in, and saw her sitting by the window, a coffee in hand. Her smile gentle but uncertain. Their eyes met, and in that instant, all the years between them disappeared. Something unspoken trembled in the air, something that could heal or break them again. He took a breath, walked closer, and said softly, "Hey." She smiled. "Hey yourself. Ready to talk about dreams?" And just like that, the quiet began to speak. The dream that never ended cafe was small and nearly empty. The sound of the ocean outside mixed with the soft hum of old jazz from the speakers. Keanu sat across from Sandra, both unsure where to begin. She stirred her coffee slowly, her eyes lost somewhere between the past and now. "Do you remember the last time we were here?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Yeah. You were talking about how you were afraid of missing the right moments in life." She smiled faintly. "And you told me that moments never really vanish. They just wait until we're ready for them." Their laughter was soft, like the old friends trying not to wake the ghost sitting between them. For a while, they said nothing. But it wasn't an awkward silence. It was the kind that holds everything unsaid: regret, affection, and something even deeper neither dared name. Finally, Sandra leaned forward. "I had a dream about us," she said. "We weren't actors, not famous, not surrounded by cameras. We were just the people living somewhere quiet, planting trees, fixing old bikes, laughing about nothing." Keanu's throat tightened. "That sounds peaceful," he said. "What happened next?" She looked at him carefully. "You disappeared." His chest sank. "Yeah, that sounds like me." She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his hand, a small touch that carried years of distance. "Why do you always run, Keanu?" He stared at her hand for a long time before answering. "Because I learned that everyone I love leaves eventually, so I just leave first." The words came out almost as a whisper, and for a second, even the sea seemed to stop moving. Sandra didn't pull away. Her eyes glistened, not with pity, but with understanding. "You're wrong," she said softly. "Not everyone leaves. Some of us are still here, waiting for you to stay." The air between them grew heavy, charged with old memories and new possibilities. Keanu wanted to say something, but his voice failed. Then Sandra smiled, the same smile that once made him believe in gentle things. "Come with me," she said, standing up. "Where?" "To see if the dream could be real." And before he could think, she was already walking toward the door, sunlight catching her hair. Keanu stood, his heart beating faster than it had in years, and followed her out into the bright Malibu morning, where their story quietly began again. The hidden lettuce road along the coast shimmered under the morning sun. Sandra drove an old Jeep with the roof down, her hair dancing in the wind. Keanu sat beside her, quiet but smiling, a small, honest smile that hadn't visited his face in a long time. The ocean stretched endlessly to their left, like a mirror reflecting everything they once were and everything they could still be. After a few miles, She turned off the highway and drove toward a small wooden house hidden among trees. "This is where I come when I need silence," she said softly. "It's been my escape for years." Inside, the air smelled of lavender and rain. The walls were covered with paintings, photographs, and one old typewriter on the table. Keanu noticed a small stack of letters beside it, tied with a blue ribbon. "You still write letters?" he asked. She nodded. "Always. But these were never sent." He looked at her, curious. "To who?" Her eyes lowered. "You." His breath caught. She picked up the bundle and handed it to him, her fingers trembling. "I started writing them after our first movie ended. Every time I wanted to say something but didn't have the courage, I wrote instead." Keanu untied the ribbon carefully, as if afraid to break something sacred. He opened the first letter. Her words were simple, honest, and raw. "You always look lost when the cameras stopped rolling. I wanted to tell you that you didn't have to be alone, but I was scared you'd pull away." He read another. "You once told me you don't believe in perfect endings. Maybe that's because your story hasn't found its ending yet. Maybe it's still waiting for someone brave enough to stay." His eyes blurred as he reached the last one. "I stopped writing when I realized I wasn't writing to you anymore. I was writing to the version of you that I never got to know." Keanu looked up, his voice breaking. "Why didn't you send them?" Sandra smiled sadly. "Because some letters are meant to be found, not delivered." The silence that followed was heavy, but warm. He closed the letters, placed them back gently, and whispered, "I wish I had known." She looked at him and said quietly, "Now you do. What will you do with it?" He didn't answer, but deep inside, something had begun to awaken. The part of him that had stopped believing in second chances. The promise beneath the rain sky turned gray as the afternoon drifted into evening. Keanu and Sandra stood outside her little wooden house, the sound of distant thunder echoing across the ocean. The wind picked up, and drops of rain began to fall, slow at first, then heavier, as if the world itself wanted to wash away everything they had kept inside for years. Sandra laughed softly, lifting her face to the rain. "Remember when we got caught in the storm while filming?" Keanu smiled faintly. "Yeah, you said rain makes everything look honest, and you said it hides tears," she whispered. He nodded, looking away. "I wasn't wrong." The rain fell harder now, soaking them both. Sandra stepped closer. "You still run from your feelings, don't you?" Keanu sighed, his voice quiet but raw. "Maybe. I learned to survive by keeping people at a distance. Every time I let someone close, they got hurt or disappeared. I thought it was better to stay alone." She reached up, brushing the wet hair from his forehead. "You call that surviving. I call that hiding." He stared into her eyes, and for the first time in years, he didn't look away. Something inside him cracked open, old pain, old guilt, all the words he never said. "I used to dream of calling you," he said, "but I thought you had your life figured out, and I didn't want to disturb it." Sandra's voice broke as she whispered, "You wouldn't have disturbed it. You would have completed it." Thunder rolled above them, the sea roaring like a heartbeat. Keanu took a step forward and pulled her into his arms. They stood there, holding on to each other as the rain poured down, washing away the silence that had separated them for years. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a confession. It was something quieter, something stronger, the kind of moment when two souls finally stopped running. After a long pause, Sandra said, "If I asked you to stay this time, would you?" Keanu hesitated. "I want to, but I don't want to ruin what's real with what's impossible." She smiled through the rain. "Maybe impossible things are the only ones worth fighting for." He looked at her, his heart unguarded for the first time in years. "Then maybe it's time I stopped fighting myself." And as lightning flashed across the horizon, Keanu finally realized the storm wasn't outside. It had always been inside him. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid to face it. The night of truth rain had stopped, but the world still felt soaked in emotion. Keanu sat by the fire inside Sandra's cabin, his clothes drying near the flames. Sandra poured the cups of tea, her hands steady though her heart was not. For the first time, there were no roles, no scripts, no cameras, just the people who had run in circles for years. Finally trapped in the same moment of truth. "You know," she began softly, sitting across from him, "people always said we had chemistry. But maybe it was never about that. Maybe it was just that we saw each other for who we really were." Keanu nodded slowly. "Maybe that's why I stayed quiet, because I was scared that if you really knew me, the parts that were broken, the anger, the grief, you'd walk away." "Keanu," she said gently, "you don't scare me. You never did." The fire cracked between them, its glow dancing across her face. He looked into her eyes and saw the same warmth he remembered from decades ago. Unchanged and steady, I kept dreaming about a life that felt simple, he said. Not fame, not money, just quiet mornings, fixing old bikes, maybe burning toast and laughing about it. She smiled. That's the same dream I told you about in the cafe. He looked surprised. So it wasn't just your dream. It was ours. They sat in silence, the truth heavy between them. Then Sandra said quietly, "There's something else I need to tell you." His chest tightened. "What is it?" "When we stopped talking years ago, I wrote one more letter. The last one. But I never gave it to you because I thought it would ruin everything." She stood, went to a small box near the window, and handed him a single folded page. Her handwriting was neat, but trembling. He opened it carefully and began to read. "If you ever come back into my life, I'll take it as a sign that the universe still believes in timing. Not perfect timing, but honest timing. And when that day comes, I won't let silence win again." Keanu single quotes, eyes filled with quiet tears. He folded the letter slowly, looked up, and whispered, "So maybe the universe finally caught up with us." She smiled softly. "Then what are you going to do about it?" He reached across the small space between them, took her hand gently, and said, "I think it's time to stop dreaming about peace and start living it." And in that fragile silence, a love that had waited years finally found its voice. The quiet after the dream. Morning light spilled through the curtains, soft and golden, wrapping the small cabin in warmth. Keanu woke first, sitting quietly by the window, watching the ocean stretch endlessly into the horizon. Everything felt still, not empty, but peaceful, like the pause after a long, unfinished song finally finds its last note. Sandra walked in, holding 2 mugs of coffee. She handed him one and smiled. "You didn't sleep much, did you?" He shook his head gently. "No. I kept thinking about how silence can be louder than words. I think I finally understand what you meant all those years ago." She sat beside him, her shoulder brushing his. "What did you figure out?" "That peace doesn't come when everything is perfect. It comes when we stop running from the things that hurt," he said softly. "For so long, I thought being quiet was strength. But maybe real strength is letting someone see your noise." Sandra looked at him, her eyes warm. "Then maybe we both spent a long hiding behind calm smiles." He nodded. "Yeah, but not anymore." The sound of the sea drifted through the open window. Gulls flew low over the waves. For the first time in years, Keanu didn't feel the weight of the past pressing on him. Instead, he felt light, not because everything was fixed, but because he had finally stopped pretending it needed to be. Sandra leaned her head on his shoulder. "So what now?" she asked. He smiled softly. "We live the dream, the simple one. No scripts, no cameras, no pretending. Just this, mornings that start with coffee and end with quiet. You think it'll last?" "I don't know," he said. "But for once, I'm not afraid of what comes next." Outside, the sun climbed higher, and a soft breeze carried the smell of salt and lavender through the room. They sat there without speaking, 2 souls who had finally learned that love doesn't always need grand declarations. Sometimes it's just about showing up, staying, and listening to the silence together. As the camera of life pulled back from that little cabin by the sea, the world looked brighter, not because everything was perfect, but because, at last, both of them were. And somewhere beyond the sound of the waves, the dream they once feared to speak of had quietly become real.